This is a fictional mindbender. There's a British comedy series that an ex-girlfriend got me into called Dwarf that was so stupid that it was funny. The story revolves around an all-around slacker named David Lister, who works on a large mining starship called the Red Dwarf. An accident occurs in which Lister finds himself the only survivor because he was under punishment in cryosleep for bringing his pet cat on board the ship. He's awakened 3 million years later by the ship's AI named Holly, and then finds that he is the only person left alive. And that's why I want to explore this character. Because how does a lazy-ass slacker whose lifelong profession was to, quote, live hard, play hard, unquote, deal with the fact that he is the last known human alive? Of course, he has his companions, a hologram, like I said before, of his uptight and greedy by the book roommate named Rimmer, and also a fan favorite, by the way. A robot servant who has a screwdriver for a head, apparently, named Crichton, and a descendant of his cat named Cat, who is basically humanoid, but is just an incredibly narcissist, but not a bad narcissist. I'll probably do vids on some of these other characters in the future, but for now, I'm just starting with Lister because he largely gets to focus on the series is seen through his eyes. To begin with, Lister's outlook is very much different pre- and post-accident, though certain elements do still carry over. Before the accident on Red Dwarf, Dave Lister wanted to cruise life, having fun with as little effort as possible, and as little work as possible as well. This quality also makes him very sociable among the Red Dwarf crew, or at least definitely more sociable than his socially awkward roommate Rimmer. His one true goal in life is to start a farm on the island of Fiji, and because of his lackluster work ethic, he's at the bottom of the crew totem pole when it comes to ranking, but he's largely okay with that, since rising through the ranks would only mean more duties and responsibilities which he genuinely does not want. Perhaps the only thing more important to Lister besides his Fiji goal is his unrequited love for his fellow crewmate, Christine Kachansky. And this is before there was a retcon, but never mind that. Someone whom his friends apparently constantly remind him that is out of his league because she is so high-ranking and he's so lazy and low-ranking. If there was a heaven for Lister at this time, it was Fiji and her. What makes this more interesting is that the issue of rank tends to play opposite with how he relates to Rimmer and Kachansky. Whereas Kachansky was someone who was out of reach because she seemed so successful, Lister sees Rimmer as the very opposite of that. Someone he does not want to become, socially uptight, quoting rules and regulations, and having zero social life and zero chance of getting laid, though Rimmer's hologram later on does correct this. Rimmer and people like him, sucking up to authority, rub Lister's worldview the wrong way, and he sees such people as inauthentic and genuinely boring. Thus, I see his constant taunting of him as passive-aggressive in a way, lashing out at the system authority overall, since he clearly can't do that with his superiors. However, this changes 3 million years later. When Lister wakes up, his world is now turned completely upside down. Informed by Holly about what happened to the crew, Lister is genuinely shocked, and also goes through a time of deep depression, though I wouldn't call it PTSD, because he does miss his friends and just being around real humans. His new crew, if you can call it that, are a ragtag bunch of total basket cases in one form or another. And yes, that does include Lister himself, though he would obviously deny it. Early on, he can't stand the hologram of Rimmer and demands to know why Holly chose him of all people to make him a companion. And Holly's response being that despite despising his old roommate, that he was also the ones he shared the most words with because he was insulting him. Cat makes an interesting and entertaining company, but is often dancing through the halls of Red Dwarf, dancing spectacularly and dressing like it as well, and admiring himself in the process. And Crichton, while not as annoying as Rimmer or self-centered, and not as narcissistic as Cat, is oftentimes busy taking care of the ship and just generally being kind of anal, hemming and hawing about almost everything. Lister would like nothing more than to return to Earth and live out his remaining dream of living out on an island of Fiji. But as the series continues through its multiple iterations, this doesn't happen, and Lister is forced to do the one thing he's put off his entire life: grow up. The circumstances change Lister's outlook. With Fiji now out of the picture, this reveals a lot more about Lister's changing worldview and nuances that were there beforehand but weren't really on the surface as he's living out his crazy adventures with his newfound family on the Red Dwarf. The reason why Lister was such a slacker was because he's an optimist. Lister can be self-centered for sure, and he's also a dreamer and on some level wants better for his life, and he wants to do that not as how society defines it, but what he's happy with. Authority and privilege all seem to remove that joy of life from life, as it were, and Lister lived for life and also contributed to his rebellious attitude. Lister does have a conversation with Rimmer about becoming an officer at some point, at which Rimmer pretty much laughed at him because the slacker, and he is still a slacker at this point, just slightly more responsible, has never had any of the qualities that the hologram prescribed as being an officer. But Lister refutes this, saying that he's grown up and become more, quote, debonair. Lister still remains a slob with questionable behaviors, like picking out his nose hairs with tongs, apparently. And yes, the series is filled with references like this. But he has become more responsible and more empathetic as well, and this all becomes more apparent after the accident. The one thing I can say about Dave Lister is that despite being the occasional hygiene nightmare, is that he always remains true to himself and his friends. And in an unfamiliar future where literally anything and everything does happen, that perhaps is really all that matters. But if you happen to agree or disagree with that, or if you're familiar with the show at all, feel free to comment below. And this is the Fictional Mindbender, and you guys have a good day.